Good evening. My name is Jennifer Steck. I'm your host and a member of the Artburst leadership team. And we are just thrilled you're here joining us tonight as we meet with several of our artists in our upcoming show. First of all, I want to give our heartfelt thoughts and prayers to those who've been impacted by the hurricanes Helene and Milton. Bobbi and Kim and Gregory are in our upcoming Fancy That show that opens on November 14th at 10 a.m. on artburststudios.com. So these shows are all online, and you'll have the opportunity to see 19 different collections from different fantastic artists. And so make sure you save that date. But let's get to why we're here tonight. So we want to meet the artist. Hello, everyone. When we first did our Artburst Live interview, Bobbi was unavailable because of the Hurricane Milton this time, and she did not have access to internet. And so we're coming back to go ahead and make sure that you have an opportunity to meet this amazing artist. So Bobbi, you managed to survive the hurricane just fine.
All is well. You still hear chainsaws and people picking up around the neighborhood, but generally our town was pretty unscathed. Very grateful. All okay.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. So we wanted to go ahead and get together after the fact here and talk about Bobbi and talk about her work. And so let's just go for it here.
Okay, here we go.
So tell us about yourself, Bobbi.
I live in DeLand, Florida. My studio is in my home. This genuine work in progress junk behind me. This is where I am in my studio. And so I am in there creating every day. I haven't always had, like lots of people who create art, I haven't had the opportunity to do this my whole life. I had a full-time career until around 2011. I was in the printing and stationery business and did stationery designing and learned about printing and all that sort of stuff. And finally, when that part of life was done, I decided studio was where I wanted to be. And right about that same time, I discovered there was such a thing as textile art, which I hadn't known about until then. I mean, I'd always made art, and I was a painter more, and a dabbler. But the things came together at the same time, that I discovered textile art and all of the possibilities of creating with fabric, and I was ready to do this full time. So that I've been working that path ever since. So here I am.
That's amazing. Well, and when you think about it, your previous career really impacts your art, printing and things like
Well,
that.
it does, and part of it is a rhythm. I love the printing business, especially, see, I'm old enough that I went through where there was such a thing as ink and film and negatives and plates and all of that stuff, which has been sent by the wayside by digital printing. But there used to actually be a chunkety, chunkety, chunkety sound of being in the print shop. And there was this process of getting an image on a plate, inking it up, putting it on the press, creating the things, setting it aside, inking up a new plate, putting it together. And so that there is a rhythm to commercial printmaking, and it's also by people who are printmakers who have a press. So I don't do anything with a press. All of the printmaking I do on fabric is hand printmaking. But so many of the things that printmakers, not commercial printmakers, but art printmakers, they do relief prints. I do relief prints, but I do them by hand. They have that process of an area on the plate that accepts the ink and resists the ink. I do that with mask outs and resist, but I do it by hand. So I think that understanding of, first of all, positive and negative space, and that a certain area of what you're printing, the substrate, whether it's paper, because I work on paper sometimes too, paper or fabric, either way, something's going to receive the image, something's going to block out the image, and how do you think that through? So I think I do kind of think in a printerly way, but now I just do it on fabric.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And when you talked about the sound of the machinery and stuff, what came to mind immediately to me was the sewing machine.
Yes, yeah. The
That
sewing
you
machine has
still
a
have that, really tactile kind of and machinery engaged in this process.
the tactile is a big deal. And I think the fact that I was working in collage before I really started seriously with fabric, I didn't know there was such a thing as art quilts. So I was making little collages on boards and a little bit of fabric, but mostly paper. And, you touch the stuff and you stick it in there with your fingers and you get glue all over your fingers and you physically build up the layers. So, and sometimes my fellow art quilters who are kind enough to, say nice things about my work say, Bobbi, how do you get layers? How are there so many layers? They say, well, there's something behind and something on top. And you put something behind something else and you've created a layer. And then you do another one. So sometimes that's physical things on top of each other. And sometimes it's layers of paint or doing something transparent. But that just sort of came easily to me. And I think that's what I brought to my quilting, that I do see it in my work.
Mhm. Well, and you talk about the layers. That's one thing that has always really fascinated me about your work. Can you describe the creative process a little more specifically and how the pieces come to life?
Well, I want to talk about the ones that I've created for this Artburst show because they're a little
Yes.
bit different from how I normally work. They are all still acrylic paints. The acrylic paint goes on fabric. When I make big quilts, which is, what I do most of the time when I'm not making things for Artburst, there's a lot of physical layers and sewing pieces together. I don't start with one big piece. The pieces that I've made for Artburst are more whole cloth. So if I've made a piece, it's maybe 20 by 30. I started with one substrate, 20 by 30, like a painter would with their canvas. But that's kind of unusual for me because usually on a quilt, you're making lots of little pieces and stitching them together. So what I had to do was think about, I did a lot of sketching to start things out, as I always do. I'm a planner, I sketch. I knew I wanted to do some patterns. I knew I wanted to concentrate on our organic things, and I knew I wanted to make some very specific palettes. So then, just like we were talking about with printing, I sort of masked off parts of the fabric and I worked on this section as if it had been created separately and I was going to sew it together. It just turned out that I did it on whole cloth. And then so I did maybe something light behind the whole surface, and then I masked off a section, and then I stenciled or printed in something here, and then I covered that up and put them here and let them go together. So it was really, really interesting to take what I always do, but just change it a little bit for the pieces I'm making in this show. And I like how they've turned out. I'm happy.
I like how they turned out too. The collection is beautiful, Bobbi. There's something magical about your pieces. Can you talk just a little bit about your colors? And you always have, there's a lot of common colors that work between all of the pieces. What is it about those particular colors that you love?
Well, first of all, I'm very big on mixing my own colors. And I know painters and people who do surface design on fabric all have their different philosophy. Mine is not the only way, but I start with a really limited palette. I just have pretty much the primary colors, two blues, two reds, yellow, black, white, two browns. That's it. And every color that I make is a creation of those things mixed. So I sort of know what I like now. I've mixed those colors a lot, and I think it takes time working with your palette. So if I want a green, for example, I'm not going to go buy, a pine green or a hooker's green or something like that. I know that some mix of either I'm going to mix it with the blacks and the yellows and get those wonderful olive greens, which just make me crazy. I love those. Or, the traditional blue plus yellow so that you're going to make green. And I know that they're going to look different. But that does give all of when I step back sometimes and I look at what I've made, I say, wow, these colors all kind of talk to each other. And well, of course they do, because they started from the same ingredients. So I love that process. And I tend to make a really strong dominant color in a piece. So there'll be a piece you say, oh, this one's blue. It's not 100% blue. There'll be other things in there, but I really think about working all the possibilities of that palette. And then I might make something where I say, no, now I'm ready for some warm colors. And I really work exclusively in those warm colors. And if it's gotten too blah at the end, I'll put in a splash of something else. But that works better for me to, and I think part of it is that translation from hue to value. Value is so important and contrast is so important. If I do something good and I'm happy with it, I'll always step back and say, wow, good contrast. Good job, Bobbi. And if I get something and it's not successful, it will be for the same reason. And when I have too many colors going on, I just have a hard time seeing the values. Maybe it's just a deficiency in my brain, but I work better by keeping that palette pretty limited so that I can see my contrast and my composition more, and then add in more colors at the end. So that's kind of how I go about it.
I think we all have our favorites.
I have a lot of pieces in this show that go towards the warm. So whenever you're ready, let me know and I'll hold some up and we'll look at them. But so I have some autumn kinds of things. I talked about that yellow plus black green that it's the most beautiful olive green. And then if you mix a little bit of white in it, it's just a cream that ties things together. And so I explored those. I would say about half of the pieces I made for this show have that palette. And then the others are what I tend to work in more. I'm really comfortable in a teal blue. If I get one of my base blues that I work with, cerulean blue or the phthalo blue, and I mix in one of the two browns, it's going to turn it just a little bit teal. And it's funny that I love that so much because I really just hate blue, like baby blue. I can hardly stand to look at it. But a teal, once it's got a little bit of brown in it, it's just so luscious to me. So I'm very comfortable in that palette. So it was another thing I did for this show is I intentionally said, let's explore some colors you don't use so much. So thank you for this opportunity to come up with a dozen new things. It's really been a great challenge.
It's been really fun, and I'm a teal blue fan myself. Well, and actually greens as well. So you do have some pieces to show us. So we're ready.
All right, let's see if this will work. These are fairly small pieces. Some of the pieces in the show are a little bigger. This one is that autumn palette I was talking about. Let me see if I can go low and then high. So this is a vertical piece. We've got leaves, we've got trees, we've got more leaves, we've got more trees.
Oh, it's stunning, Bobbi.
And I think you can see that thing I was talking about sections. So I covered up this whole half and worked the part where the leaves are just patterned, more like a graphic pattern. And then I covered up this half, and then I did it where it was more of an organic kind of feel. And then I uncovered both halves and sort of worked across. And let me see if we can do leaf close-up. Okay, so leaf close-up, see if you can think about how did this come to be, all of these colors on here. So I started with just a plain unbleached cotton muslin. That's how I always start. That's the background. And then this color that you see inside the vein is a really pale, that's that black and yellow olive green mixed with white to make that beautiful cream. So this whole background here behind the leaf was that beautiful cream. Then I cut stencils in those shapes of sort of finger or leaf kinds of things to cover that up and cut out the shape of the leaf and then rolled that whole thing with the olive green. So then when I pulled off the masks, oh look, the underneath shows through, but I had to cover it up to make it show up. So now I had the opposite of the stencil. I had cut the stencil like a hole to make the leaf, okay, and put the olive green in there. Now I rip that off and there's the leaf. Now I have to cover up the leaf and paint the whole thing dark blue behind it so the leaf will pop out from the background. Then after I had that, then I got some stamping things, some hand cut stamps I had made with this. Let's see if you can see that red. I mixed up a sort of brick red with a little bit of white in it so it would be opaque and stamp that over the top. So there's all kinds of layers that have happened in building up just that section. And a little bit of that linear leaf vein thing, you can still see just hints of it outside in the blue. So that's an example of how these patterns build up.
Can you show us the other side of that same build?
My actual making method, I don't work much with a brush. I work a lot with a roller. And so I mask off areas. So this area here that you see with the trees, that's a stencil that I've had for some time. So my stencils become like old friends. It's like my working vocabulary. And again, as a body of work, I think that's nice because then some favorite trees, I'll see them in different pieces and used in different ways, sometimes just to depict a tree, sometimes sort of a fairy tale background if I'm doing a storytelling piece. So there's a lot of layers in there. I had to use a stencil, again, that was like the donut hole, so the ink is going inside the shape. I mean, when I say ink, I mean the acrylic paint. To make the shape of the tree, I have leaves that are stenciled on in the background. There's some more of that linear kind of stuff that we saw inside the big leaves. It's in the background. Then I put on a little transparent warm, that orange, just to make it pop a little bit, and had it go down. Then this goes to a above and below. So there's like the roots below the tree and a little more of that orange showing through. So the whole thing, once you look at it, it's, well, let's be poetic and think about, 13 ways of looking at a blackbird. This is like 6 ways of looking at a tree or a leaf, and they're all there together. And that's interesting to me when I do landscapes. I really admire representational landscapes who would look at a beautiful vista and recreate it. But that's not me. I'm not interested in doing that. I want to look at it in different ways. I'd much rather bring the rock to the foreground and put something else in the back and mix them up a little bit, because that's what I'm interested in depicting. So of course, this is not realistic. There's not a tree this size and giant leaves next to it. We understand that we're creating a new universe based on things that we actually see.
Yes. Okay. And do you have another one?
I do, right. And this one is completely different. So here we are in the blue-green family.
Ah,
So let me bring this up. So we've got these trees. So first of all, I want to talk about watercolor, because when I'm working with the acrylics, but when I use the foam wet, or when I wet the fabric first, then the linear edges are a little soft. They just float around a little bit and they create some unpredictable things. And that happened with these trees. So here's the tree background. It goes up, there's a moon. Don't look away, more's coming. Here comes the little boat.
I love your boats.
The little boat in the reflection of the trees. So I turn those upside down, and it's a very dreamlike piece. Again, these are real elements. Everyone's seen a tree, everyone's seen a boat, they know what they look like, but we're not thinking we're depicting an actual boat. It's more like a dream experience. And so I tried to capture that. And this is all, there probably aren't but about 3 color paints in this whole thing. The blue is used a couple ways, and a little brown mixed in and some white. And I have several in the show that are variations of this with the boat and the trees.
I love the stitching too. The stitching is its
Look at
own
that stitching.
layer.
Look at all that stitching in there. So that's the last thing. After they're painted, then I stitch them. So in this one, fans, you're just going to have to go onto Artburst and look at the previews to see all this up close. This is not the best way in the world to show art, is holding it up in the Zoom.
Yes.
But it's lifelike. In those trees, I did just a very simple parallel lines right next to each other. And it's so amazing when you do that. You have an area where I was looking, I said, gosh, I love these trees. I don't think I want to mess with them. Will the linear lines mess it up? But somehow that pattern being so rigid and uniform, it becomes almost invisible and the images show through. And yet it's got a little more texture because now it's been broken into lines. Whereas on the below section where the boat is, I did horizontal lines. And of course, I wanted to follow the shape of the water and give more of a liquid feel. So the stitching becomes another kind of mark making, another way to describe what the life is of that section that I'm trying to get at. And so that's one of the wonderful things about working in fabric. There's this whole different thing that you do to it after you've put the image on the fabric.
Yes. Can you show us the back and how somebody would hang the piece?
I'm so glad you asked that, because a lot of people ask, and it's easy to show on this little one. This is the standard way on the back. They're going to hang just like any picture frame from one D-ring like that. And so this is, for those who love all this technical sewing talk, this is called a D-shaped pocket. That means the pocket, I'll put a little masking tape in there, has some give to it. And so you construct your pocket so that it has that give. And that way, when you hang it up, you're not looking at your dowel poking through and ruining the front of your piece. And if you had just cut a pocket, if you made a pocket and it didn't have that slack in it, it wouldn't hang nicely. So now when it's hanging, see how it's hanging where all the poochiness is happening in the back, which is just fine. The other thing about putting acrylic on fabric is it makes it heavier. Any piece of fabric with acrylic paint on it is much heavier than it was before you put the acrylic piece of paint on it. And when it has some gluing it in the construction, this back is glued on. It's got a nice heft. So this is not going to flop around. It's going to hang really nicely on the wall. And even the big pieces, same thing. I put a pocket on the back, and it comes dowel and D-ring included, no extra cost.
Well, and so what's so nice about that is as soon as you unwrap your treasure from Bobby, you can immediately, put it in different spots to figure out where that perfect spot is. And you don't have to add anything else to it. It's just ready
Yeah,
for you
that's
to enjoy.
I have some artists struggle with this, and I have gone through different phases and how to finish the work, and oh, should I put them in a box frame or something like that? And you can, and I'm not against it, but I just love the traditional presentation of the fabric piece against the wall. These are heavy enough that they hang nice and flat, but it's not a piece of plywood. It's got just a little bit of give to it, so you know that you're looking at a tactile thing when it's there on your flat wall. So I'm always comfortable with saying you're going to put it on your wall and it's going to look great.
Oh my goodness. I have a few places in my benefit from that. I think I've always loved fabric. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us that you would like art lovers to know, or anything that you get questions on?
Some people ask, well, how do you take care of it? And whatever you do, if you had an acrylic painting hanging in your house, which is you probably do nothing to it, that's what you do to these. You could dust it every now and then. That would be fine. You could just take a cloth or a feather, dust it and dust it off. I mean, you're not going to wash it. It's going to be. You should think of it as just like an acrylic painting. Most acrylic painters will start on a board or a piece of stretched canvas and put paint on it. I started with a piece of flat fabric and I put paint on it. So you want to treat it exactly the same way. It doesn't need anything special. Of course, every artwork I would tell someone don't hang it in front of a window because even though I use, archival quality paints and the archival quality medium, nothing can stand up to prolonged sunlight. So that's just a good rule no matter what you get. And it's also true for fabric.
Well, Bobby, thank you for meeting with me at this time. I'm glad we were able to
Yes,
do
I
this
appreciate it.
again. I can't wait for everybody to see your collection. And just a comment to everyone, if you've seen work that you already love from Bobby, don't forget to subscribe on our website and follow her on Instagram, because you're going to be able to see more teasers about what's happening on Artburst. But she also has a lot of other things going on, including the fact that she teaches too, for those of you who want to
Oh,
look
great
at her.
plug. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty. A lot of the Artburst artists teach, and they inspire me all the time, and I hope they inspire you too. So just a reminder, you'll be seeing Bobby here in just a few weeks at the Fancy That show, which opens on artburststudios.com on November 14th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So that will be noon Eastern Standard Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time. So we will see you in a couple weeks, Bobby.
Thank you so much.
So let me introduce you to Kim Harrell. Hi,
Hi.
Kim. So Kim is joining us. She has been in Artburst studio shows before, and we are so thrilled you're here again, Kim. And Kim is one of our fantastic jewelry artists. So tell us about yourself, Kim.
Well, I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and went to college here, studied sociology, and then I married a British man and moved to London, where I discovered my love of jewelry eventually, and went back to school and studied that for 4 years and started my business in 1997, after graduating in 1996. It's also the same year I got married. And then in 2003, my husband, who's British, and myself came back here with our three young children who are now all in their 20s. And I have my studio in Aurora, Colorado. I've taught at community college. I'm currently teaching at the Metropolitan State University of Denver and the Art Students League at Denver, sometimes in my studio. I do a couple art fairs. I do Artburst studios, and I pretty much have sales happening through my studio and commissions. And when they come in and pick up their commission, they see something they like. It's just so I've managed to build quite a business over my 25 plus years doing it. And now that the kids are all grown, I've been in the studio pretty much full time. since 2019, because when COVID came, I stopped teaching and I really focused on the business, but it was already ramping up pretty
Yes.
great. So I would say the last 10 years of the business have been really pretty fantastic, with the last handful of years being the best.
Oh, that's great. And you're in your studio, correct?
I am. I've got some pieces behind me that are not in the show, but they are either purchased or have other destinies. But yeah, I'll look forward to showing you what I put together for this show. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kim's studio is in Aurora, Colorado. And so if you plan on visiting Colorado or you live in Colorado, Kim, they can contact you, correct? And
Yeah.
actually stop
I
by.
have hours. Like if you Google me, you'll see my hours are posted, and I do repairs as well. I don't do all repairs, and some people don't like the price, but I do repairs. But I would say like 80% of my business is selling my jewelry directly to people, either things I've already made or commissioned.
Yes, that sounds great. And you teach jewelry making. So if
Yeah, I
some,
teach it at Metro. Right now I'm teaching jewelry and metalsmithing to non-art majors. So they're like people who maybe have never done anything. But this is a nice group, and Metro is kind of an unconventional university. You get people coming like going back later to go to school, and so there's all ages. There's young ones and some older kind of 30s somethings. And the studio is nice. It's kind of long and narrow and chock full of stuff. I'm still trying to figure out where everything is, but I really enjoy being teaching at a university. So that's been a really nice
yeah,
change of pace.
that's fantastic. Well, I think you've inspired jewelry artists for a long time.
Oh,
So tell me how you fell in love with designing and creating jewelry.
well, when I was really young, like preteens or something, I was always crafty. I was a Girl Scout and all that. Well, actually, I don't know if I ever made Girl Scouts. I was definitely a brownie. I think I did Girl Scouts for 1 year. But my mom was always crafty. There were three of us. I'm the oldest, and she would always have projects when we were home during the break vacation. So we would have Christmas ornaments that we'd make. And she was a wonderful seamstress, and she still does quilt making occasionally, although not so much anymore. But she could sew anything. And back in the day, we took home ec. So I think working with my hands has always been something I really liked. I never thought about a career as an artist. I didn't come from that background. I had been told my great grandmother that we had paintings around, and she was a pianist and art. I really liked her. She was quite interesting a person. My great grandma, 80 something, she's still sipping her sherry. And I'm like, ooh, I hope I'm doing that. So anyway, she's the only artist that I'm full-fledged confessed artist, I guess, that is in the family. Although there are a lot of creative people in my extended family. There's some musicians and stuff, but I think I'm the only metalsmith or 3D artist. Yeah, I think I always just kind of dabbled in it, but it wasn't encouraged. I was encouraged academically because I guess I'm a good student, intellectual maybe, and that intellectualism is more my family's purview. So that's being the oldest, that's where I was pushed. So I did well at school, but I always took art classes whenever I could, and my parents started collecting art, I think, when I was in high school, and I was always extra interested in that stuff than anything else. So fast forward to London. Well, and I'd make earrings out of weird things. Like, I just go to Michael's and buy the earring hooks, and I'd hook on keys, and there's pictures of me wearing these horrible things in the 70s. But and, I always wanted to make stuff. So fast forward to Britain, it was beads that kind of got me into it. I just came across the bead shop, and it's like a candy store, you can put your hand, or a hardware store. I love hardware stores too. So I just started buying them, and I'm like, I guess I should do something. So I started making just really straightforward earrings, like anybody in the world can do it. That got really boring fast, but I started selling them, and I started getting innovative. Friends were just buying stuff, and I thought, So I wasn't happy in my job, and so I did some research, and I found out I started taking evening classes, which led to like an associate's degree, almost like a not work study, but a work thing. I started working for people. I started working on the markets at Camden and Covent Garden selling, and that was really good. So I was selling people's work first, and then people would have me as a bench assistant. So I would do the icky work, like polishing all day or shaping up 50 bangles or something horrible like that. So, but while I was studying, it really got me good. So anyway, jewelry was what got me there, but I ended up majoring in silversmithing, which is object making, which we don't do in your shows. But I'm kind of schizophrenic. I have my vessel work and my wearable work. So, but the wearable work is what pays the bills, and I enjoy it all, and they feed each other. So I get commissions sometimes for silverware, and I get ideas for jewelry, and
The last show, we talked about your weaving and those kinds of things, but you had some really spectacular pendant pieces that just kind of stopped me in my tracks.
oh,
There's
thank you.
something about your work that makes a bold statement. And I love that about all of those pieces. They're
I'm,
unbelievable. Just
I'm
un
working on a piece that I'm not going to show you because it's still being worked on. It's a big pendant, like in the last show, with a woven chain. But it's a big piece of buffalo turquoise I had cut. So there will be another big pendant, with no embellishments, just really straightforward. Yeah, I'm enjoying making the big pendants. That's why I started weaving my own chains, because I couldn't find what I wanted that would suit them. So, and I'm like, well, for how much money I need to charge for these things, let's find a way to make the chain. And I found this method called Viking knit, which I kind of taught myself, and I'm teaching people now because it's so easy. I'm addicted to it. I've got one on the go now.
I love that. The other thing I really love about your work is the simplicity, many times of the pieces. They just kind of speak for themselves. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Oh yeah, it's funny because I taught earlier today. I have one of my students, she's an industrial designer is what she's studying, but she's taking this as one of her electives, and she's a minimalist like I am, and we were just talking about it today, and I and my students are also realizing how hard simple is. People think simple means, it does mean uncomplicated, but that's in the final product. How you get there is not always as straightforward as you think.
Yeah.
And that is what's fun about jewelry. I have 10 students, and I have to help them problem solve not all of them. Some of them are really quite clever, but I also kind of let them figure it out. Or I say, well, what do you think we should do? Instead of me coming up with all the answers, because there isn't always just one way to do it. And sometimes they have better answers than I do. And I'm hardly the omnipresent jewelry goddess. And I've learned a lot for sure, but it's also really fun to see people figure it out for themselves. So yeah, simple is hard. And it's really funny because I love, almost all of my shirts in my wardrobe have flowers on them. I'm obsessed with, I don't know where that came. My dresses all have flowers on them, but not my jewelry is it's all about the shape, the form, the materials. I just want you to see the silver or the gemstone. I don't even like really super busy gemstones. This gemstone has to speak to me. There's definitely specific colors that I go for. Yeah, I don't know what it is about simple and elegant. I think part of it is because I don't want it to be so crazy mad. I mean, I guess there are people who could wear really, there's a saying that goes something like less is more and more is more, and anything in between doesn't work.
I love that. I love
I think that's pretty good. So I'm the less is more, but I can't do the more is more. It drives me crazy. It's just too much. I mean, even when I'm going out, I'll put on rings. I always wear my wedding rings. I always wear earrings. And then sometimes, oh, I feel like a necklace. And then I'm like, nope. I look in the mirror, take something off. It's too much. It's too much.
Well, you want people to appreciate the beauty of each piece.
I do. I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do want them to be wearable either with other pieces you have, or can really make it, like if you wear solid black or one color, you have a beautiful silver bangle or a beautiful necklace or a big bold ring. It's just a really tight, elegant, sophisticated, chic look. And I have a lot of professional women who are high up, and they don't want the bling jewelry, and but they want something bold and powerful. So yeah, I call my jewelry goddess jewelry. Really, it's simple but elegant, but makes a statement for sure.
Yes. And you make men's rings as well.
I do. I have a couple of men clients actually. In fact, it's been a really interesting last couple of years. There must be a trend. I know in the 70s men wore jewelry, right? It was because my dad always had jewelry on, and I've made him many pieces, but he wears his jogger pants and his or his drip dry pants and his hoodies all day now because he's retired. But so I don't make him anything anymore. But I have some wonderful men who maybe it's because of this one particular one they want big bold cuffs with big stones and or big metal cuffs and big bold rings. And I've even had like I had a man client I showed people on Instagram or whatever that's these rings. He always has pairs. And I had a client go, I want that ring. And so I have to make her a ring. So it's really fun. But yeah, I love that men are wearing. In fact, I got a pair of earrings for a man. My son-in-law bought a pair of earrings recently, and my daughter bought a pair for him, her husband, for Christmas last year. And yeah, so I mean, I love me, and I don't assign a gender to my jewelry. I do have a client who says, "Oh, that's too feminine for me," and I'm just like, "Well, okay." But and that's his definition. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's really interesting. I mean, I like that men like my jewelry, I think, because of the boldness and the clean lines, especially like designers or architects have always liked my work, even from the beginning. I'm obsessed with edges and not, they don't have to be like sharp or anything, and just clean and pure and they kind of show off the form. I'm so much the Bauhaus. Form follows function and less is more, and
Yeah.
that's me.
Yes. Well, and Rebecca says Kim has the unique ability to work in subtle details that don't distract, but rather accentuate the beautiful simplicity of her pieces. She's the queen of bold elegance.
Oh, thank you. You can write my next artist statement, Rebecca.
Now, so there are, we talk about the look of the simplicity, but there are so many intricate details that lead to that. How do you approach a brand new piece and how does it develop?
So, like for this collection that I'll show a few pieces soon, it really I have a multiple ways of starting. But when I know it's a collection, and I have to thank Artburst Studios for getting me out of my rut because having these collections, because I stopped kind of doing collections. I would just do add to current collections. So this makes me sometimes I do kind of take from existing pieces, but I have shapes. I have a strong affinity to certain shapes and colors. And so, and I still buy beads and I buy stones and I don't always have a plan for them. So I decided with this collection, because I already had a few pieces made that would work with the collection that aren't out there and for the general public. So they're new for Artburst people. And I thought black and white, that's kind of standard for me. But I'm like, ooh, the buffalo turquoise. And the buffalo turquoise material isn't turquoise, it's not blue or green. It is called white buffalo turquoise because one, the predominant color tends to be white, but it often has black inclusions and sometimes little yellow. It's just a really unique stone, hence a white buffalo and rare. And the turquoise comes from the fact that when they find it, it is usually found near a turquoise mine. So it's not actual, the material isn't actually turquoise, but it is known as white buffalo turquoise. And there's only a couple of people who mine it. And I am so fortunate to have an assistant who goes to these shows and meets these rock guys. And he got me some beautiful material that was custom cut. And some of these pieces are going to be in the piece. I'm wearing a pair of the earrings now. You can't really see very well because they're very white. Some of them are more white, some of them had little bits in them. So I had some white buffalo turquoise beads that I had bought a couple, 3 years ago, and I had never used them. And I'm like, I need to make a different kind of necklace. I can't keep making the same necklaces. So I thought, how can I use those beads? And I went back to my basics, circle, square, triangle, and I particularly square and the circle are really important to me and variations of. So we get ovals and yanis and funky triangle squares that aren't true squares, or squashed circles or squashed ovals or asymmetrical, but kind of a nod to those shapes. And these are kind of like barrel shaped, so they're like a squashed down. And then I put square beads in between. So there's a contrast between the roundness and squareness. And that kind of speaks to the whole collection with a square or round shape in various iterations. And then, of course, my signature textures, most of which is my steel block texture, but there's some rock texture around as well. So that is one way how I approach things. And then I just dip into my toolbox of shapes and colors and things that I may have done before, but I try to do a little something different. So I don't like doing the same thing again and again and again and again. But you'll see familiar shapes, which means that if you collect my work, eventually I'll make something that will go with what you already have. I mean, that's kind of designed that way because I tend to use the same kinds of stones, but sometimes the shapes change or they're from a different mine, so the color's a little different. So I just kind of sometimes it's the material speaking to me. In this case, it kind of was. Otherwise, I start from photography and things that I'm already attracted to, and then I just start sketching and breaking it down and come up with some shapes. And then from there, things start suggesting to myself like, oh, those would be great earrings, or maybe that should be a brooch. I haven't made a brooch in a long time. Maybe it's time to make a brooch. And I don't always go like, I need to design a necklace, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I want the materials that I've chosen or the building or the landscape picture I took or something to speak to me to make something. And I just like, I'll have things hung up around the studio and I just keep looking at it, wait for an aha moment one day. And just sometimes it's just bits and pieces laying around on the studio bench and you're like, gosh, that's a great shape. And you just kind of go for it.
You talked about the fact that you have some pieces to show us. We're
I do.
ready.
So I've got these little earrings on, but they're, like I said, simple, but even like with these earrings, you've got the beautiful stone. You can see very well.
Oh, I love those.
And they're just on a simple hook that I make. And then the back's open, so you can still see the continuation of the pattern. And then it keeps them from being too heavy. So these are a beautiful weight. And because the coloring is so subtle, you could wear this with gold or because there's some yellow in there, and you could wear them with anything really. So they're kind of great. And then just as a contrast to those, I have these square earrings that have the buffalo turquoise that kind of show.
Oh, lovely.
And this is a shape that I like to use. And I did 2 pairs of these in turquoise, bright blue turquoise, and they flew out. So I had Ethan cut me some buffalo turquoise from this new, and I just love the creaminess of that white.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. And I love the funky shape. It's kind of mid-century modern. I can mix it up. But I think they're very Southwestern. They're kind of landscapey. I think that just kind of happens because I'm obsessed with like landscapes and horizons. So that kind of happens. Do you want me to show you another one?
Of course.
Well, there's this crazy, speaking about men's jewelry. So this is a crazy, big, huge Wyoming black jade. And I love using stones that are like from the Southwest or the West. So black jade, the Edwards Wyoming black jade is very coveted and is beautiful. Sometimes under the right light, it can look green, but this is definitely black Wyoming jade. It is not onyx. It's much warmer than onyx. Is very cold, like a snake eye. I don't like onyx very much, but I really like this. And it's just in a simple bezel with my textured overlap band. And I think this is like a size 12. I can't remember. So it's a big ring. But I have ladies who could wear this size, we're not all the same size, but I think it's a fabulous, fabulous ring you could wear just every day.
So do people stop you a lot to comment on a particular piece you're wearing?
No, because I don't.
Oh,
I mean, that's not that I'm the jeweler who doesn't wear jewelry. I mean, I wear earrings, but these are my everyday. And people do say they like my earrings. And most of my collectors have a pair of these. These are like I've been making these for decades. And my ring, like the one I'm wearing, the green one, was the first of with the little diamond. I think I had one in the last show with a
yeah.
little diamond on the side. This was the first of that style. So no one ever gets that one. Um, but I do get compliments like my mail collector, people literally, and I was with him because he is prone to exaggeration. He said, people stop me in the street, girl. And I'm just like, yeah, right, whatever. Well, I'm walking down the street with this man, and I swear on a stack of whatever you hold sacred, this guy pulled over in his pickup and stopped and got out of his car, was shouting out his car saying, I love your look. What's going on? And it was hysterical. And so they started talking about where they could buy hats because he had a hat on and he had all his bangles on and his rings. Oh, this is my jeweler. It's hysterical. I'm like, I guess you do stop traffic. So,
That's so fun. What a great story.
well, he's quite a personality. He's an inspiration to me. I mean, he happens to be an artist, an amazing artist, and we see the world the same way. And he's really inspired me to let some more things kind of come out in my work that I don't always. I don't know. It's just been a natural. It's like I met him at the right time in my life where I was wanting to kind of grow my work a little bit, and through him, I have found a way with real confidence, and he's always having me make things for him. So it's fun. And in fact, I've been told by gallerists we should do a show together. So we
Oh,
might do that. I don't know what that looks like, but
that's awesome. And so you sometimes work really closely with your collectors to build
I
something
do.
specific for them.
I do. I mean, they usually want me to be able to do what I want. I have one collector that's like, I want this, do whatever you want. And so I just do some drawings. Sometimes it's around a stone, sometimes it's around a theme or material. And then I ask some questions, maybe if it's around an anniversary or birthday or something, and then I just come up with the designs and they get to choose what they want. And they usually I get artistic license. They're not trying to when somebody tries to get too minutia
Yeah.
around specifics, unless it's like practical things like, oh, I can't wear those kind of hooks or something, then I'm like, maybe I'm not your jeweler.
Yeah. Well, it makes perfect sense. They
Well,
chose you for a
people
reason.
don't know how jewelry is made, most of us, and they start asking me to do things. I have one client right now who she's fabulous, but she wants me to do these things, and I like being challenged, so I like trying to figure it out. But I've realized now with her, because I've only been working with her for a year or so, that I need to kind of let her know about some practical considerations that maybe I just have to find the right way to deliver that. And that's the hardest part of working with clients is, okay, I really want to make this happen for you, but you need to be aware that this is the situation.
Yes. Well, and trust and to trust you.
Yeah.
Trust. I
Yeah.
think
But sometimes, customer's always right. So I still do it.
Kim's work is just beautiful. And, she does some smaller pieces, she does some larger pieces. So there's probably something for everyone. And you can certainly contact Kim in advance of the show if you have questions about her work or anything like that. Kim, it's so delightful to have you tonight. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Um, don't be afraid to reach out to me. I think some people, I mean, I'm just doing what I do, right? But I do think people are intimidated about reaching out to artists and talking to us. And I know, I mean, please. And even if you're like, oh, I have never seen you work in this stone, would you? And the answer is probably like, oh, do you have one? Or I can get one for you. Or, I like working with people. If they like my work, we will definitely come up with something. So please don't be afraid to ask. And especially if you have certain considerations like knuckle issues and you need a hinged ring, or if you want, you just have things that you want to be considered for your piece. I'm always happy to do that. And I love my clients are the people who often put me, so there's a pair of earrings I designed because a client asked me to, and I love them so much. I'm like, I am adding these to my collection.
Yes.
So
Yes. Well, Kim's a wonderful person to work with, and we highly recommend that you do that. Now, how many pieces will you have in the show, Kim?
well, fingers crossed. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces done. 11.
Okay.
Yeah, 11 or 12.
Yeah. Okay. Between 10 and 12 pieces will be
Yes,
available
I'll
for
definitely have 10. But if we have 11 or 12 is academic. I'm pretty confident my goal is to have 12. So
yes. Well,
okay.
and keep in mind when the show goes live, you'll be able to go in and zoom in on the pictures. So you're going to be able to see all those details that Kim
Yeah.
was talking about and the differences in the stone and those beautiful colors and how they work their way through each piece. So Kim, thank you again for joining us tonight.
Jennifer.
And we will see you on November 14th at 10 a.m.
Yes, you will. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who came today and really have fun with the Artburst things. Get in there early because the good stuff, it's all good, but your favorite piece might sell. And I've had disappointed people. So
Yes, yes. And we'll talk about how that works here shortly, just so that everyone knows, because I know Artburst is new to a lot of people. It's a little bit different than some of the shows that you may have been to. So I'll give you a couple ideas on how to get a head start when the show begins. But have a good evening, Kim, and we can't wait to see those 12 pieces.
Jennifer.
Okay, well, so I just want to catch everybody up if you joined us just a little bit later. So Bobbi was unable to join us tonight, unfortunately. She and her family are safe. She lives in Florida. They have power back, but they don't have internet. So she couldn't join us tonight, and she certainly sends her regards. So we are so sorry that she's not here tonight. We love Bobbi. She's among our amazing artists, and the work that she has for this show is just spectacular. So now we're going to move in a little bit of a different direction, and we're going to move away from jewelry. And we are so delighted to have Gregory Gorman with us tonight. How are you, Gregory?
Hi, Jennifer. I'm doing fine and really loved Kim's stuff, her work.
Isn't
Um,
it gorgeous?
yeah, it's good. And I have a wife who likes jewelry, and I have a habit of buying her jewelry. So
Oh, good. Okay, don't talk too loud. So,
I,
I know
I
her work is truly magnificent, as is yours.
well,
Um,
thank you.
so yours, I mean, what I really love about the Artburst shows is how the artist's work differs between artists, that everybody has their own story to tell in such different ways. But before we get into that, tell us about yourself and your creative journey.
Well, I was born in Michigan. When I was very young, I lived in the back of my father's hardware store. And I was very impressionable as a youngster with his posters that he had in the sporting goods store, the pheasants with the hunting dogs and the colors. And back in those days, a lot of the posters were very, very colorful, and a lot of them were done by artists. They weren't always just computer generated. There wasn't computers. So I was very influenced by that and started wanting to do watercolors very early, probably like, 6 or 7. And then as a preteen, we moved away from that area, but we stayed in northern Michigan. And I was very influenced by all the trees and the wonderful beauty that surrounded me. And I did a series of pen and ink drawings of trees, the deciduous trees without the leaves, just the branches, and then also the different types of pine trees and fir trees. As a preteen, also, my mother signed me up for an instructor that took about 5 or 6 of us out every week on a Saturday, and we painted plein air. That's where you paint outside, and we went to all these different locations. We even went into the city, which was a small city, but we set up on the sidewalk and did different techniques. We learned different techniques like how to use a wax as a resistance for watercolor so that when you put the wax on the paper and then you put the watercolor over it, you get a negative area. And so I learned quite a bit from her. And then moving away from northern Michigan and moving more towards the Detroit area, I had some really good instructors in high school. And so I did a lot of different things. I did everything. I uh, did sculpture, making sculpture out of plaster of Paris, and doing the lost wax technique where you make a little sculpture out of wax, and then you melt the wax out, and you have a hollow space, and you put it in an centrifugal force, and it spins it around, and it pushes the metal into the mold. And so I learned how to do just about everything, but I was always very, very taken by painting. Painting was what I really enjoyed to do. I really found my own way in with painting. And then from there, I went into college. And when I was in college, I thought, I need to do something practical with my art. Then back then, I'm 70 years old now, so we're talking in the 1960s, 1970s. A lot of artists didn't make a living doing art. So I thought, well, and I liked what was called industrial design. It still is, and it's making products. It's finding out what is wrong with a certain product that is on the market, and why is it uncomfortable to use? Well, that's ergonomics. That's how well do you interact with it as a person using this tool or this appliance. It could be anything, furniture. So I got into industrial design, and that's what I ended up getting my degree in from the University of Michigan, was a degree in industrial design with a second major was painting. And from there, then life happened, got married, you know, and had children. And eventually, I was always doing my art, even when I was working in the factories for a while. I was always finding a way to do my art at some point on the weekends, and even at work sometimes. And that turned out that later, still working for an automobile company, I became an illustrator and actually worked on a launch team. When they launch a new vehicle, they need drawings for classroom, for instruction. I would actually stand underneath a car on a lift, and I would sketch the underneath parts, the muffler and the brake system. And then that ended up taking me into a salaried position, and eventually retiring and moving out to the Pacific Northwest, which I just truly love. It's very similar to Michigan. It's actually the 45th parallel is pretty much the same line with Washington and Oregon and Michigan. And so, and then I worked for a newspaper for a while. And then I finally got to do what I wanted to do, which was just my art, my what I wanted to paint, what I wasn't, painting for somebody else. And that's kind of brought me to this point now in my life where, Kim was talking about how she has kind of hit her stride, and now she can do what she wants. That's where I'm at. I can pretty much work on the paintings that I want to work on, what inspires me, what brings me joy. And I love it. I try to do it every day. Of course, life gets in the way and you can't do it every day, but pretty much try to. At least I get up early every day and try to get at it. So
Uh,
that's kind of where I'm at today.
I love that. And when I see your work, I can see the inspiration that is carried kind of throughout your life here. And so let's talk a little bit about what it is that fascinates you about boats and trees.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, the trees, I love doing the trees in the winter, all the intricate lines and angles of the branches and the thickness so I guess I was always very much influenced by line. As an artist, you learn to draw, and you learn the different aspects of being able to render the subjects you're looking at. And line, quality, weight, that's one of them. Contrast, shape, form, composition. And so that's what I liked about doing the trees at that time, early on. And then the vessels, the fishing vessels, I love the way the rigging works with the masts and the way the rigging swoops down close to the deck and the way there's rope ladders that go up to the top of the mast and the swoop or the slope of the bow of the boat and just the shape of the boat. It has a certain gracefulness to it that I really respond to in painting. So between those two subjects, there's a lot of similarities in them, and that's really what I enjoy about doing the boats is the intricacy of it. And then my trees that I do now are much different than those earlier line drawings. My trees now, as you'll see in one of my examples later, are a little bit more spontaneous and a little bit more not so contrived. They're kind of free and wild in a way.
Yes, I love that. Now, Kim says your paintings remind her a bit of Alfred Wallace of the St. Ives British Modernist group.
Oh, well, I am not familiar. I'll
Oh,
have to
well, good. We'll have to make
I'll
sure
have to
and
jot him down.
yeah, yeah. So I'll make sure and send you that name so that you can look Alfred Wallace up. The other thing to me that's fascinating about your work is your bold, I mean, bold color. So tell us about what it is about that that has you using all of those different colors.
Well, I was painting in pretty much your traditional manner. I was always very influenced by color, but lots of times, you get into the your painting and you're kind of if you're kind of a semi-realist, as I think I am. I'm a modernist in a way, but I'm not an ultra realist, like someone who paints to where it looks like a photograph. But I painted in that way for a lot of years where I was representing what I was seeing and trying to pull some of the color out of it, the natural color that was showing up in front of me. But after the pandemic and being so cloistered and so tied up and everyone was unhappy and I thought of, well, what can I do? And I thought, color, people really respond to color. And so I developed a way of seeing differently, more like an impressionist or even a Fauvist like Matisse. I started using colors in unexpected ways and making the colors vibrant, making them almost jump off the canvas or the paper. I felt that it would kind of instill joy in people. The bright colors, all the different colors that are available to us are so varied, and mixing them on the canvas sometimes and putting them on that way, like with the trees, where I use a palette knife and I just make a burst of color that contrasts with the color next to it, the blue and the pink, and maybe a purple and an orange, and then there's complementary colors that we're all pretty much aware of as art viewers. And so I just decided that I would go for vibrancy and boldness and try to instill some joy and happiness in my viewer. And people have really responded to it quite well. I get a lot of compliments
Yeah.
on that. There is a quote by Dale Chihuly. He says, "I never met a color I didn't like." And so I kind of go by that.
Yes, I love that because you have such a great variety. Now, you have some pieces to share with us that are going to be in the upcoming show.
Right, right.
We're ready.
So here is a fishing vessel with some of that line work that I talked about, and this graceful swooping and the swoop of the deck here, the way it, and then the reflection in the water, which is really something that I really enjoy doing. I really enjoy trying to capture the reflection from the different elements on the vessel in the water. And the water is moving, plus the vessel is moving. And so you get these different bits and dabs of color that are bouncing and kind of dancing. You'll hear artists talk about, the colors dancing on the waves kind of a thing. And so that's that's what one of the things that I really enjoy. I've done a lot of work with the fishing vessels where they're in a harbor and the water is very still, and then there's just a reflection, just almost a mirror reflection. I find that painting the with the water moving is much more interesting and much more of a challenge actually than just flipping the image and having a reflection, just a
Yes.
mirror image. This is a little bit more interesting, the yellow and the little bit of greens in the water and a little bit of pink and oranges.
Oh, it's
So,
magnificent, Gregory.
so
I,
that's
yeah, that the way the movement that just shows in that painting. And so I want to see your next one too, because it's
right.
speaking to your other favorite thing.
Yes. So now this is trees, and this is kind of a technique that I developed after seeing someone do something very similar. There's a little bit of reflection because it's a watercolor is under glass. But what I've done here is these trees are fairly wildly colored, and the way I do it is I put down a column of clean, clear water on the paper, on the watercolor paper, and then I use some very intense, vibrant ink, and I just drop little drops of ink, and you can see how the blue here has spread out, and
Oh,
then how the yellow and the orange here have mixed together. So there's yellow and then there's orange. Whoops.
oh
Um,
my goodness. I love the fact that the color is in both pieces. I mean, you can still see you in both of these beautiful pieces.
yes, this is a real fun technique. This idea of putting the water down first that's with no color in it, and then adding the color and let it do its own thing, let it mix itself. And then you can go back in and do some branches with a script brush or a finer brush. And then you can add other color. And you can even, this one's truly just water and ink and watercolor inks. But I've done some that have Posca pen. You can use mixed media. There's actually a couple pieces in the show that are mixed media pieces where I've used acrylic paint
Oh
along
my
with.
goodness. We love that. We absolutely love that. So, are any final thoughts tonight, Gregory?
Yes, I would like to read another Chihuly quote. I don't know if something can be too colorful. I do believe that. I don't think anything can be too colorful. And then finally, there's one more quote that I really, this is a quote that Dale Chihuly, I saw this on a documentary and I had to write it down and then I had to check it to make sure it was accurate. And it's about the process. It's about the process of creating art. Now, it's his quote, so it's the way he feels about creating art. It happens to be also the way that I feel about creating art. And here it is. I think an artist often knows when he's hit onto something. In fact, an artist can't even move on unless they have that feeling. Sometimes you might have to fool yourself that you're doing something important. But unless you can make something important, you can't continue. And that's how I feel sometimes when I'm doing some of these works, and I'll get to a point where I have to set it aside
Yeah.
because I know it's not correct. It's not how I envisioned it, or it's not how I feel it should be sent forth into the world, almost like it's undeveloped. I'll set it aside and I'll go back in later and do more work on it. And sometimes those are some of the best pieces, the ones that you've thought about and you've kind of mulled over in your mind a little bit. Maybe you've even dreamt about them at night. I mean, I do become pretty obsessed about my artwork, about my artwork. So,
That's so funny. Because I'm not sure people realize that because sometimes I'll be working on a piece and there's just a problem I can't figure out. I can't figure out.
mhm.
And I go to bed and I do dream of the answer.
Yes, Jennifer, I have to tell you, I have even dreamt that I am painting. I've actually dreamt painting because I do plan out these, especially the fishing vessels, they have to be planned out because there's so much going on. All the rigging is, oh, crisscross and here and the bass. And so I do have to plan them out. I've actually gone to bed and actually been painting in my sleep, you know.
I love that. Those are always kind of the fun dreams, I think. Well,
Yeah.
Gregory, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is going to be your first show with us with Artburst, and we are so delighted and honored that you're joining us.
Well,
Um,
thank you so much.
so we will see you also on November 14th when the show opens.
Yes, I look forward to it. Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I just want to thank our artists, first of all, for coming tonight. And again, Bobbi, we miss you, but we're so glad that you and your family are okay. And we look forward to connecting. Our thoughts do go out again to all of the people that have been impacted by both hurricanes that have just recently come through. So we are definitely thinking about you. So I wanted to give you just a couple tips and pointers. If you've never been to an Artburst online show, how it works and how you can make sure and get the pieces you love. The shows only last 52 hours, so they're very quick. And the show will go live on artburststudios.com, as I said, at 10 a.m. on November 14th. And you'll want to be online. Now it's at Denver time, so it's mountain time. So you'll want to check your time zone to make sure that you're there on time. We always suggest that you subscribe in advance. If you subscribe, then you will get a 24-hour advance preview of Gregory's work and Kim's work and the other 17 artists that are going to be in the show. And that'll help you kind of make your plan of action. And if you want to get an even bigger head start, you can create an account in advance. Basically, what that does is it allows you to put in your shipping address and so on, so that when the show opens, right before it opens, you can log in and then you can find the pieces that you love and purchase them. We have been so delighted over the last couple of years to host. Oh my goodness, I think we're almost 70 different artists. So we are so lucky to work with so many amazing people, and we love introducing you to artists that you may have never met before. So again, the show is online. It's called Fancy That. It's opening on artburststudios.com on November 14th at 10 a.m. You can find the perfect artwork for your collection. They come in a variety of sizes for those little cozy spaces where you just need something bright. And of course, the beautiful jewelry, all the way up to larger statement pieces. Or you might find the perfect gift for somebody for the holidays. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you at the show.